April 18, 1943. 0934 hours. 11,000 feet above the Solomon Sea. Bogies. 11 o'clock high. Lieutenant Douglas Canning's voice cracked radio silence for the first time in over 2 hours. Major John Mitchell snapped his head left. There. 8 dark specks against scattered clouds. 2 larger aircraft in formation. 6 smaller ones weaving above them like protective wolves. They had found Admiral Isoroku Yamamoto. What Mitchell couldn't know was that this moment, finding a moving target after 600 miles of dead-reckoning navigation over featureless ocean, would be called impossible by aviation experts for decades afterward. What Lieutenant Rex Barber couldn't know was that in the next 3 minutes, he would kill the architect of Pearl Harbor and change the course of the Pacific War. But 4 days earlier, none of them knew this mission would even exist. April 14, 1943. Pearl Harbor. Fleet Radio Unit Pacific hummed with the sound of transcription machines and hushed voices. In a windowless room deep inside the complex, Technical Sergeant Harold Fudina bent over a decoded Japanese naval message, his pencil moving steadily across paper. Fudina was Nisei, second-generation Japanese-American. Before the war, he'd been teaching mathematics in San Francisco. Now he was part of the most secret intelligence operation in the Pacific, breaking Japanese naval codes. The message he was translating made him stop breathing. Commander Goggins. Sir. You need to see this. Commander William Goggins crossed the room in 3 strides. His eyes scanned the English text. Then he read it again, more slowly. Inspection tour schedule. Commander-in-Chief Combined Fleet. Admiral Yamamoto. The message contained everything. Departure time from Rabaul, 0600 hours Tokyo time, April 18, arrival at Balale Airfield, 0800 hours. Aircraft types, 2 Type 1 medium bombers. Escort, 6 fighters. Even the exact route. Japanese military precision had just handed American intelligence the location of their most wanted target. Within 30 minutes, the decoded message reached Commander Edwin Layton, Pacific Fleet Intelligence Officer. Layton stared at the paper as if it might vanish. Admiral Isoroku Yamamoto. Harvard-educated. Poker playing. The man who had orchestrated Pearl Harbor with mathematical perfection. The strategic genius who understood America better than any Japanese commander because he'd lived there, studied there, traveled from Detroit to Texas observing the industrial might he knew Japan couldn't match. The man who had warned his own leaders that war with America was unwinnable. And now, for exactly 1 brief window, he would be within range. The decision. The intelligence chain moved upward with extraordinary speed. Admiral Chester Nimitz, Commander Pacific Fleet. Admiral William Halsey, Commander South Pacific. Each man understood what this opportunity meant. But killing Yamamoto required something that didn't exist, a fighter with the range to fly 600 miles, intercept a moving target, fight, and return. No fighter in the Pacific had that capability. Except one. The Lockheed P-38 Lightning. Twin engine. Twin boom. Distinctive silhouette that Japanese pilots called the fork-tailed devil. With external drop tanks, its range might, barely, be sufficient. The authorization request reached President Franklin Roosevelt himself. His response was 3 words, "Get Yamamoto." Approved. But approval meant nothing without execution. And execution depended on mathematics that seemed impossible. April 17, 1943. Guadalcanal. Major John William Mitchell stood in the operations dugout, surrounded by maps and fuel consumption tables. He'd been awake for 36 hours straight, calculating and recalculating. Distance from Guadalcanal to the intercept point, 435 miles direct. But flying direct meant crossing Japanese-held islands with radar installations. They'd be detected. Intercepted. The mission would fail before contact. The indirect route, swinging far out to sea, added 165 miles. Total distance outbound, 600 miles. Return, 400 miles. 1,000 miles total. Mitchell ran the fuel calculations again, hoping the numbers would change. They didn't. Standard P-38 internal fuel, 360 gallons. 2 external drop tanks, 330 gallons. Total, 690 gallons maximum. Fuel consumption at cruise settings, approximately 50 gallons per hour per engine at low altitude. Available flight time, 5 hours and 45 minutes under perfect conditions. Required flight time, 4 hours and 30 minutes minimum, assuming flawless navigation and no delays. Margin for error, essentially zero when accounting for combat maneuvering. Mitchell looked at the faces of the pilots gathering for the mission briefing. Young faces. Confident faces. Faces that trusted him completely. He would navigate for the entire formation using dead reckoning. Compass. Airspeed indicator. Clock. And mental calculation. No radio beacons. No landmarks. Just endless ocean and the hope that his mathematics were perfect. 1 degree of error sustained over 600 miles would put them dozens of miles off course. With 7 minutes of combat fuel available, they couldn't search. They would get one chance. Find the target exactly where and when predicted, or fail completely. The pilots. Captain Thomas Lawnford Jr. studied the mission profile with barely concealed excitement. 6 feet tall, broad-shouldered, son of a decorated World War I aviator, Lawnford saw opportunity everywhere. 5 aerial victories already, some disputed, but officially credited. At 27 years old, he possessed both exceptional flying skills and exceptional ambition. This mission could make him famous. The pilot who killed Yamamoto would be celebrated forever. Post-war political career. Book deals. Magazine covers. Glory. Lawnford intended to be that pilot. Across the tent, Lieutenant Rex Barber checked his own notes with characteristic thoroughness. Oregon farm boy from Culver. State College engineering student before enlisting in September 1940. Where Lawnford saw glory, Barber saw a problem requiring solution. Navigate 600 miles. Intercept moving target. Destroy bombers. Return alive. Each step needed to be executed with precision. No wasted motion. No unnecessary risk. Just methodical problem-solving backed by accurate gunnery. Barber flew the way he'd approached engineering studies, with calm calculation and attention to detail. His 5 confirmed victories had been achieved through careful positioning and precise shooting. Never spectacular. Always effective. At 25 years old, Barber understood that survival in combat came from making fewer mistakes than your opponent. Glory was irrelevant. Effectiveness was everything. The target. 600 miles north, aboard the battleship Musashi at Rabaul, Admiral Yamamoto prepared for the next day's inspection tour. At 59 years old, he remained Japan's most formidable strategic mind. Born Isoroku Takano, later adopted into the Yamamoto family, he stood 5'3" but commanded absolute respect. His left hand bore evidence of the Battle of Tsushima Strait in 1905, 2 fingers lost to Russian shrapnel. The injury had never diminished his skill at calligraphy, poker, or inspiring loyalty among subordinates. Vice Admiral Kusaka made one final attempt to change his commander's mind. Admiral, American fighter activity around Bougainville has increased dramatically. Perhaps postpone the inspection tour. Yamamoto's response was gentle but final. The pilots need to see that their commander shares their risks. The schedule stands. What Yamamoto couldn't know, was that his own attention to precise planning had doomed him. The detailed itinerary, transmitted via naval code, had been intercepted. Decoded. Translated. And sent to pilots who were, at that very moment, preparing to kill him. Japanese confidence in their naval codes was absolute. Those codes had never been broken. The encryption was mathematically unbreakable. Except that American cryptographers had been reading Japanese naval traffic since before the Battle of Midway. The code had been broken for over a year. Every Japanese transmission was an open book. And Yamamoto's inspection schedule had been written with fatal precision. April 18, 1943. Carried on. Guadalcanal. Master Sergeant Leo Godfrey supervised final preparations under harsh work lights. Ground crews moved with practiced efficiency, performing the rituals that separated life from death. Every round of ammunition checked by hand. For Browning 50 caliber machine guns, 500 rounds each. One Hispano 20mm cannon, 150 rounds. Linked belts of ball, armor-piercing, and incendiary ammunition in 4:1:1 ratio. Fuel tanks topped to absolute capacity. Main tanks, 360 gallons. Drop tanks, 165 gallons each. Every gallon measured precisely. 1 gallon might mean the difference between landing safely and ditching in the ocean. Oil levels verified. Hydraulic pressures checked. Control surfaces inspected for full range of motion. Oxygen systems tested. The mechanics knew their pilots faced impossible odds. So they did the only thing they could, make every aircraft perfect. As darkness began giving way to gray dawn, the pilots emerged from the ready room. Flight gear. Mae West life preservers. Shoulder holsters with Colt 1911 pistols. Each man carried the knowledge that water landing meant sharks. Capture meant execution. Japanese treatment of downed American pilots had become increasingly brutal. Intelligence reports described beheadings. Medical experiments without anesthesia. No prisoner of war camps. No mercy. The pilots didn't discuss it. They simply checked their pistols carefully. Takeoff. At 0725 hours, Mitchell's P-38 rolled down the coral runway at Henderson Field. Behind him, 17 more Lightnings followed in sequence. Lieutenant Joe Mlanahan's aircraft suffered a blown tire on takeoff roll. The P-38 skidded sideways, tearing off the right wheel in a cloud of coral dust. Mlanahan climbed out uninjured but eliminated from the mission. During climb out, Lieutenant Joe Moore's fuel transfer pump failed. Without access to drop tank fuel, he couldn't make the distance. He banked away, returning to base, watching his squadron disappear toward the horizon. 16 P-38s continued the mission. 2 fewer than planned. The already razor-thin margin had just become thinner. Mitchell led them down to the deck. 30 to 50 feet above the ocean. Below Japanese radar coverage. Salt spray coated windscreens within minutes. And then began the longest 2 hours of their lives. The flight. Imagine flying in close formation, 30 feet above ocean swells, for over 2 hours. Constant throttle adjustments to maintain position. Constant scanning of instruments while avoiding spatial disorientation. The hypnotic rhythm of waves rolling beneath. The sun beating through plexiglass canopies, turning cockpits into ovens. Radio silence absolute. No conversation. No position checks. Just the steady drone of Allison engines and the trust that Mitchell's navigation was perfect. Several pilots later reported fighting drowsiness. Lieutenant Roger Ames slapped his own face periodically. The pain shocked him alert. Others sang loudly, children's songs, bar songs, anything to stay awake. Because sleeping meant dying. Fuel gauges dropped steadily. Each pilot made continuous microcalculations. Current consumption rate versus distance remaining. Would there be enough? The mathematics played out in 16 cockpits simultaneously. Burn too much fuel outbound and you wouldn't make it home. Conserve too much and you might lack power for combat maneuvering. Each pilot balanced survival probability against mission requirements, knowing that Mitchell's navigation had to be flawless or none of it mattered. The intercept. At 0934 hours, Mitchell reached the final navigation turnpoint. He checked his watch against calculated position. If his dead reckoning was correct, they should turn northwest now for the intercept. If he'd made any error in wind calculation, compass deviation, or speed estimation, they would miss the target entirely. Mitchell waggled his wings. 16 P-38s banked in unison toward Bougainville. They had been airborne for 2 hours and 9 minutes, covering 410 miles of open ocean with nothing but compass, clock, and faith. And then Douglas Canning's voice shattered radio silence, bogeys. 11 o'clock high. Range, approximately 5 miles. Altitude differential, 6,000 feet. 8 aircraft in perfect formation. They had found Admiral Yamamoto. The navigation feat that experts would later call impossible had just been executed flawlessly. Mitchell had found a moving target after 600 miles of dead reckoning, arriving 1 minute ahead of predicted intercept time. But finding the target was only the beginning. Attack. Skin those tanks. All flights. Mitchell's order was sharp, urgent. 165-gallon drop tanks tumbled away toward the ocean. The P-38s shed their drag-inducing burden and accelerated hard. Engines pushed to war emergency power. 1,475 horsepower per engine. The Lightnings surged forward, climbing at 2,800 feet per minute. Ahead, the Japanese formation maintained course, apparently unaware. 2 Betty bombers in echelon. 6 Zero fighters in 2 flights of 3, positioned above and behind in standard escort formation. For a handful of seconds, tactical surprise was complete. Then the Zeros reacted. Drop tanks tumbled away from the escort fighters. They nosed over, diving to intercept. Standard doctrine: engage the attackers while the bombers continue to their destination. Captain Lonfer saw the Zeros coming and made an instant decision that would generate controversy for decades. He turned to engage them. His reasoning, as he would later claim, eliminate the escort threat to allow Barber a clear attack run. His critics would argue he was glory hunting, seeking easier fighter kills over the primary target. Whatever his motivation, the tactical split was complete. Lonfer turned hard left, rolling into a vertical scissors maneuver with the diving Zeros. Barber maintained course toward the bombers. The kill. The lead Betty nosed over into a desperate dive. The pilot attempted to reach treetop level where the jungle would provide cover and the P-38 speed advantage would diminish. Barber followed. Dive angle 45 degrees. Airspeed climbing past 400 miles per hour. Closing rate perfect. The Betty was now a geometry problem. And Rex Barber had always been good at math. He calculated deflection instinctively. Bomber speed approximately 260 mph. His speed 410 mph. Dive angles converging. Lead required, there. Distance, 2,000 yards. 1,500. 1,000. At 500 yards, Barber opened fire. For Browning 50 caliber machine guns and 1 Hispano 20mm cannon. All weapons concentrated in the nose, firing along the aircraft's centerline. No convergence issues. No spread. Just devastating focus destruction. The sound was like canvas tearing, impossibly loud even through engine noise. Tracers arced forward. He could see them walking toward the target. Concentrated fire converged on the Betty's right engine and wing root. The effect was instantaneous and catastrophic. The right engine exploded in orange flames. Wing spars severed by concentrated fire. The entire wing bent upward, then separated completely. The bomber rolled violently left, completely out of control. Yamamoto's aircraft plummeted into the Bougainville jungle trailing fire and debris. A black column of smoke marked the impact point. One bomber down. But Barber had no way to know if that was Yamamoto's aircraft or the decoy. There was a second Betty, racing south along the coastline at maximum speed. Second kill. Vice Admiral Ugaki's pilot had chosen a different escape route. Instead of diving for the jungle, he stayed low over the water, 50 feet above the waves. Lieutenant Besby Holmes spotted the fleeing bomber and rolled into attack position. His closure rate was excessive. He fired a long burst that damaged the Betty's right engine, producing white vapor trails of leaking fuel and oil, but overshot before achieving decisive effect. Barber acquired the second bomber after Holmes's pass. The Betty was barely 50 feet above the ocean surface, damaged engine trailing smoke. Barber lined up for a deflection shot. Aircraft speed 280 mph. Target speed 200 mph. Angle 30 degrees. Lead required. He fired. The first burst walked across the water, sending up geysers of spray. Adjust. The second burst climbed into the fuselage. Large pieces of metal skin peeled away. Some struck Barber's P-38 with audible impacts. The Betty's left engine caught fire. The pilot attempted a controlled water landing but hit the ocean at over 100 mph. The aircraft broke apart on impact. 2 bombers destroyed. Mission complete. But Barber's P-38 had taken substantial damage. Return fire from the bomber's defensive guns and possibly Zero fighters had riddled his aircraft. 104 bullet holes would be counted after landing. Hydraulic fluid leaked from punctured lines. One engine ran rough, possibly from debris ingestion. But both Allison engines continued running. The twin-engine reliability that made the P-38 unique was about to save his life. The return. The flight home tested every pilot's skill and nerve. Fuel reserves critically low. Several aircraft operating beyond calculated ranges, succeeding only through favorable winds and careful engine management. Lieutenant Besby Holmes's fuel situation became desperate. Rather than risk ditching at sea, he could attempt landing at the emergency strip on Banaka Island. But Japanese submarines had been reported in the area. He chose to continue, trusting his calculations and the Allison engines. The scattered P-38s gradually reformed as they approached Guadalcanal. Radio discipline partially collapsed as pilots called positions, reported fuel states, updated on damage. At 1230 hours local time, Fighter Strip 2 appeared ahead. Holmes landed with both engines sputtering. Fuel gauges reading empty. Perhaps 3 minutes of flight time remaining. Others landed with less than 10 gallons remaining. The margin between triumph and disaster had been measured in gallons of gasoline. 16 P-38s had departed. 16 returned. But had they succeeded? Aftermath. Japanese search parties found Admiral Yamamoto's crashed Betty the following day. The wreckage was scattered through dense jungle approximately 4 miles inland from Molar Point, Bougainville. Yamamoto's body was discovered thrown clear of the main wreckage but still strapped in his aircraft seat. He maintained a dignified posture even in death. His white-gloved hand still clutched his ceremonial katana sword, a family heirloom dating to the 16th century. Medical examination revealed 2 gunshot wounds. One bullet had entered below his left shoulder blade, exiting above his right eye. Another had struck his jaw. Death had been instantaneous. Probably during Barber's initial firing pass. The psychological impact on the Japanese Navy was devastating beyond calculation. Yamamoto was not merely a fleet commander but the embodiment of Japanese naval tradition. His understanding of combined fleet operations was unmatched. His realistic assessment of American capabilities had provided the only check on Japanese strategic overreach. Captain Yasuji Watanabe, who survived the second bomber's crash with severe injuries, later described it simply, the void that could never be filled. Controversy. The dispute over who shot down Yamamoto began immediately upon landing. Captain Lawnfur aggressively promoted his claim. His account described performing an extreme vertical reversal, rolling inverted, and firing into the bomber's wing root from above. This version would have required him to be in two places simultaneously while performing maneuvers exceeding the P-38's capabilities. Lieutenant Barber's account was straightforward: stern chase and attack on the lead bomber, approaching from behind and below. Japanese witnesses, including Zero pilot Yanaga interviewed after the war, confirmed seeing only one P-38 attack the lead bomber from behind and below. Exactly as Barber described. The angle of bullet impacts on Yamamoto's body, entering from below and behind, matched Barber's attack geometry perfectly. The Air Force officially credited both pilots with half a kill each in 1991. A political compromise satisfying no one. In 2003, after extensive analysis of Japanese records, crash site evidence, and witness testimony, historians concluded that Barber alone was responsible. Rex Barber had killed Admiral Yamamoto. But it took 60 years for history to acknowledge the truth. Legacy. Operation Vengeance demonstrated that in industrial warfare, individual leadership still mattered. Superior technology meant nothing without human skill to employ it. Intelligence superiority enabled surgical strikes. The Pacific War continued for 28 more months. But its outcome was no longer in doubt. April 18, 1943, had seen American fighters execute the longest interception in aviation history. The mission succeeded through synthesis of elements, brilliant planning, superior technology, exceptional flying skills, and extraordinary luck. Weather. Navigation. Tactics. Courage. Major Mitchell had found a moving target after 600 miles using only compass and calculation. Lieutenant Barber had executed precise gunnery under combat conditions. Ground crews had prepared aircraft to perfection. Cryptographers had broken supposedly unbreakable codes. And Admiral Yamamoto, the one Japanese leader who understood that war with America was unwinnable, died in the Bougainville jungle because his own precision planning had enabled his enemies to hunt him. The age of strategic assassination had begun. Warfare would never be quite the same. 16 P-38 Lightnings had flown to the very edge of mechanical and human endurance, fought a brief decisive battle, and returned to tell the tale. In those few minutes over Bougainville, they achieved what thousands of bombers and millions of bullets could not: the precise elimination of irreplaceable enemy leadership. Operation Vengeance had delivered exactly what its name promised.